It looks like we're live here on IMPA Virtual Events 2020 on Thursday. Yeah, sorry, I don't have my screen on, gentlemen and ladies out there. Bit of IT trouble here this morning, so I apologize for that, but thank you for waiting. It is with great pleasure introducing Ian Hutton today, the documentary that inspired me personally to get involved with this program and driving others forward at a later stage. Ian has, with Liz Bonin, made a documentary from Lord Howe Island, where he resides, basically showing some images that really got to me on birds who had been eating plastic and really got me to act. And I think most of you listening in on this who had talked to me also will understand the impact it did on me back in the days, and it still does. I'm not going to do too much talking about you, Ian. I'd like you to introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, and then walk us through this growing problem that we don't see day to day, but it's existing. Over to you.
Okay, well, thanks, Mikhail. It's a great pleasure to be on this forum, and it's wonderful that you have got a group such as this looking at sustainability and some of the big issues like plastic in the ocean. So it is a great pleasure to be here. I live on Lord Howe Island, rather fortunate for that. There are only 350 people living on the island. It is one of the most beautiful islands in the world. It does receive a lot of Australian government funding for conservation, but there are issues around the world that impact us, even though we have all this wonderful funding, and they're issues that we as residents don't have any means of controlling. It's really up to the bigger world. So the presentation I've got here is going to present a bit of background statistics on plastic that is produced, some nice visuals of Lord Howe Island. It is a stunning place, and then some of the research that I'm involved in to highlight this problem of seabirds and plastic. So thank you, Mikhail, for having me. Okay, next. And again, very impressed by the IMPA having this program called SAVE, with a target getting to zero, reducing the number of plastic water drink bottles down to zero. So it is a great program, that part of it. Next. Ocean plastic is a major issue around the world, and every country in the world, even the Antarctic continent, has got plastic on its beaches that's been thrown up by ocean waves, etc. Next. And there's a few statistics about plastic. Every year, 360 million tonnes of plastic are produced, and that number is increasing each year. And half of that plastic is used to produce single-use items. That is something that is only used by us humans once. Could be a plastic water bottle, could be a takeaway knife and fork at a takeaway shop, could be a plastic bag, all sorts of single-use things, and some of that does find its way into the world's ocean. 8 million tonnes of plastic entering the ocean each year, and that's adding to what went in last year and the year before and the year before and the year before. So there's lots of plastic floating around the ocean. Next. And one of the largest items produced out of plastic are beverage bottles. So in 2014, just in the USA alone, 101 billion bottles were sold, and of those, more than half were plastic water bottles. And out of all of the litter that comes out of ocean cleanup sessions, 14% is beverage bottles. So there are, in nearly every country in the world, people doing cleanup beaches and waterways. They don't just remove the litter, they do actually count it and sort it so that there's an idea of what the plastic is, where it's coming from. So 14% of all litter coming out of the ocean is from beverage containers, and that equates to a higher amount if you consider the lid as well as the label. Next. And of course, plastic bags, we all do know about the scourge of plastic bags, but the figures are staggering. 500 billion plastic bags were used in 2014, and nearly 1 million every minute used around the world. And the average working life of a plastic bag is just 15 minutes. So some of those plastic bags find their way into the environment as well and impact on wildlife. Next. Well, islands are probably the habitats on the planet that do feel the impact of ocean plastic the most. Okay, next. So the waves and the wind throw plastic items up on the beaches of islands. So the plastic is floating around the ocean, ends up on the beaches. Next. And the plastic that is in the ocean does impact on animals that are breeding on islands. So whether it's seals, turtles, seabirds, these animals are feeling the impact of ocean litter. Next. And for an island economy, tourism is a big part of island economy, and the wildlife of islands is largely what people do go to see. So very important to have healthy wildlife. Next. And island communities rely on fish as a food resource. So here where I live on Lord Howe Island, fishermen are out nearly every day, and tourists love to eat the fish. The locals rely on the fish. And now in some oceans of the world, they're catching fish with the plastic in the ocean. So the fish are ingesting plastic, and in the stomach, some of the chemicals out of the plastic do leach into the flesh of the fish. So next. Now we'll have a little look at Lord Howe Island itself. There is a beautiful image of it. It's about 11 kilometres long, 2 kilometres wide, and has two spectacular mountains, 875 metres high. There's the location. It's a long way off the coast of Australia. In fact, it's 700 kilometres northeast of Sydney. And to access Lord Howe Island, there is one air flight a day in an aircraft that carries 30 people, and that's a 2-hour flight. So it is a long way off the coast. Next. And the island received its World Heritage listing in 1982 for several reasons. One reason was the scenic beauty, another is the outstanding biodiversity, and that includes the world's most southerly coral reef. Next. And living on and around the waters of Lord Howe Island, there are over 500 different fish species and many thousands of other marine organisms. Next. The island's covered in 85% natural rainforest, and half of the plant species are only found here, nowhere else in the world. And there are a number of rare birds breeding on the island, including a flightless woodhen. Next. And it's a mecca for seabirds. There are 14 different seabird species breeding on the island, perhaps 500,000 seabirds each year breeding. These birds include the masked booby. Next. The red-tailed tropic bird. Lord Howe Island has the largest breeding colony in the world of this bird. Next. Tiny white-bellied storm petrels breed here. They're the size of a canary and weigh 48 grams. Next. And we'll play that video which shows the flesh-footed shearwaters, and that's one of the iconic seabirds of Lord Howe Island. Does that video play? Maybe it's not going to play that video. Next. So they are an amazing seabird, these flesh-footed shearwaters. They're about the size of a pigeon. They do fly very long distances over the ocean using very little energy. When these birds looking for food for chicks, they go out off Lord Howe Island for about 8 days and nights. And they can travel around 1 to 2,000 kilometres in that time. And they have the ability to swim down very deep in the water pursuing food. So they have waterproof feathers, they have web feet, and they use those web feet and the wings to swim down 60 metres deep pursuing their food, which is mainly squid and fish. Next. And if that video will play, that would be good. These birds, late in the afternoon, every day they come and sit off the island in these large groups that we call a raft, and they gather there in the raft, just riding the swell currents up and down. And just on sunset, they take off from the raft and fly into their breeding colonies at night. So they're only on the island during the evening. During the day, they're out fishing. Next. And when you see a photograph of them in flight, they're very well designed through evolution for that life in the air. They really are at home in the air and the water. They're very awkward on the land. Next. And since 1970s, researchers have done surveys about every 10 years to see how the numbers are on the island, and they have declined about 30% in the last 50 years. Next. And the reason for these declines in their numbers are listed there. So the long-lying fish industry do drown perhaps several thousand each year. There are roads on Lord Howe Island, and at night the birds occasionally sit on the road. Some get run over at night, but plastic ingestion by these birds is coming out as a major problem for the decline in numbers. Next. Scientists have identified around the world 5 large gyres, and the word gyre means ocean current. So the North Pacific gyre is the most famous one, and it's a very slow moving current that goes clockwise around. And as that current goes past the coastline of Asia and North America, it's picking up debris coming down rivers and concentrates that debris in the middle of the gyre. Next. So that gyre has this new name. It's called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Next. And that photograph there shows just off the coast somewhere in Asia. So the amount of plastic debris coming down rivers is staggering, and that image shows it. Next. In the middle of the North Pacific Ocean is one of the most remote islands in the world. It's called Midway Island. It's a US air base. Next. And that island gets a lot of plastic debris washed up on its beaches. But the majority of the plastic does just float around and around in the ocean. Waves break it up into small pieces. Next. And one of the seabirds that's breeding on Midway Island is called the Laysan albatross, and that bird forages widely on the ocean of the Pacific, picking up food, but it's also picking up plastic and taking the food and the plastic back to feed its chick. And on Midway Island, there are hundreds of skeletons of those chicks, and we'll just have a look at the next slide. So hundreds of these skeletons around Midway Island. They are of the chicks of the Laysan albatross, and you can see very evidently there what was the cause of death for that bird. And there are lots of bottle caps and disposable cigarette lighters. And people often ask, why do the parent birds pick up plastic? Surely they can tell the difference between food and plastic. Well, out in the ocean, when that plastic bottle cap or cigarette lighter is floating around, various marine organisms attach and grow on it. Could be seaweed, it could be barnacles, and to a seabird that then looks and smells like food. So that's why they pick up the plastic. It's covered in marine life. Next. Well, looking at Lord Howe Island, it is a very remote island, 700 kilometres from any population area. It has World Heritage protection, and a lot of funding goes into protecting its wildlife. Next. And looking at one of our beaches, we do have a number of sandy beaches or a boulder beach like this one at Boat Harbour. Next. Next. And although the island is remote, we find the same as any beach in the world, plastic getting thrown up on the beach. And the seabird breeding here, the flesh-footed shearwater, picks up pieces of plastic, thinking it's food, probably because it is covered in marine life like barnacles. Next. And in the year 2000, I found this skeleton in the forest of Lord Howe Island. It's the skeleton of one of these flesh-footed shearwaters. You can see looking through the rib cage. It's full of plastic pieces and most likely the cause of death for that bird. Next. So that was the plastic that was removed from that one bird. That piece of graph paper there is about 17 by 18 centimetres, so quite a lot of plastic. Next. And this is the effect of plastic on seabirds. If the bird eats plastic, like a round bottle cap, that can block the gut of the bird and the food can't get through. Sometimes the plastic pieces are sharp, they can puncture the stomach, and that can lead to infection or possible death. And the plastic contains contaminants. It could be organic molecules, it could be lead or mercury or arsenic that might be used as a colouring or a softener for plastic. And some of those chemicals can leach into the birds and it can affect their nervous system and reproductive system. Next. Also, the adults pick up the food and the plastic and they bring it back and feed that to their chicks. And the chicks are sitting in the ground in a burrow and they sit there for about 90 days being fed food and plastic, and the plastic just accumulates in their stomach. Okay, next. And when it's time for these chicks to fly away at the end of April, many of them make it down to the beach. They walk down onto the beach, but they can't fly away. They're too weak. Next. And many of them die on the beach. Some might make it into the water and die there. And we have found hundreds of these birds on the beaches. And next slide. And we do cut them open to see what's going on. It would be good if this video could play. It shows one of these dissections. If we can play that video. So I've cut the just the body lining of that to reveal the stomach, and the stomach is a muscular pouch. And now I've got the scissors. I'm just going to snip that stomach open, and it's quite shocking when you see what pops out there. Pieces of plastic, all sorts of plastic items that the parent birds have picked up on the ocean, and they fed to their chicks. So there are broken bits of plastic. That round bottle thing is a balloon clip, and there we have the foot of a doll, a plastic foot of a doll that has been discarded, ended up in the ocean. These plastic shards, some of these are quite sharp, and they're the pieces that can puncture the stomach. Another balloon clip, and there are pieces of bottle caps and all sorts of items in those birds. Next. And in 2005, we started a research program to monitor the chicks and just find out how widespread this issue of plastic ingestion is. So It's a technique to get the chicks at night as they're leaving the island, put a tube down the throat and gently pump some water in to get them to vomit. It's a technique called lavaging. Next. So the water just fills the stomach. It does urge them to vomit up. You can see the bird vomiting there into a plastic bucket. Next. And what we have found each year, around about 80% of the chicks have got some plastic. So it's not something that's just an uncommon event. It is quite prevalent that these birds are being impacted by the plastic on the ocean. Next. Now we wanted to know where these birds are picking up the plastic from. They do nest on Lord Howe Island, but they're only here during the summer months. During the winter, they do depart. They migrate away from Lord Howe Island. Next. So we're able to attach some data loggers to the legs of the birds and release them and catch them 1 year later. Next. And retrieving the data logger and downloading that onto a computer. Next. We were able to have these maps showing the movement of the birds. So each individual colour shape there is a bird, an individual bird with its data logger on. And what we see there's a lot of activity with these birds in the summer months off Australia when they're here breeding at Lord Howe Island. And in May, they migrate north and they're around the seas of Japan and Asia. So they are travelling around and they're able to pick up plastic in any ocean in that travel. Next. In April 2011, while doing this research, we found a chick that only weighed about 1/4 of what it should. We kept the bird overnight and it did die. Next morning, we cut it open. Next. And all of that plastic was revealed from inside that chick. So that's an idea of how much plastic one chick can have been fed by its parents. Next. While doing the research in 2016, we couldn't remove everything from the stomach of a bird by the water flushing technique. So we managed to push a lump up from the stomach into the bill, and opening up the bill, we found 3 of these balloon clips that the parents had fed the bird. Next. And we even did get pieces of the balloon out of that bird. Next. So here in Australia, we're working with Melbourne Zoo and their interpretive education people have a 3-year program to try and have balloon releases banned across Australia because of the problem for wildlife, not only seabirds, but also turtles. Next. And here on Lord Howe Island, if we do find a balloon washed off on our beaches, we do contact the organisation, the business, and let them know of the problem. And most of the people are very responsive and they do stop that balloon releasing. Next. Microplastics. The plastic pieces floating around the ocean gradually over time do break up into smaller and smaller pieces. They're called microplastics, and you can see there on the beach at Lord Howe Island and one of my colleagues with a handful. And sometimes we put a 1 metre tape across the high tide line on the beach and we can count up to 190 pieces of plastic on that 1 metre line. And that puts also some estimates of the amount of microplastics in the open ocean at 200,000 pieces per square kilometre. Okay, next. And around the world, people are now catching fish with the plastic inside the stomach. Next. And the questions being asked, why are humans eating their own garbage? Next. And that's because the microplastic floating out in the ocean is eaten by small fish. Those small fish are eaten by larger fish. Next, and guess who eats the large fish? Humans do. So the problem of plastic is getting into the human food chain. Many oceans of the world, this is occurring, and in fish markets in America and parts of Asia and Europe, researchers do buy the fish at fish markets and they find the plastic in those fish. Next. Fortunately, this problem's been known about for some 30 or 40 years, and there are people trying to carry out programs to minimise this. So there's some of the programs. Next. In some countries, they have machines that accept empty plastic and aluminium beverage containers for a refund. Next. And a Dutch university student invented a prototype boom to collect plastic in the ocean. Next. Next. And there are machines that take plastic and convert that into diesel fuel. Next. So that's people with a solution. Next. Here are other solutions. Awareness, so that's why I do these lectures around the world. Minimise single-use plastic. You can buy compostable plastic materials, more environmentally friendly. People do beach cleanups. We need to lobby governments to legislate no single-use plastic. And a consumer has a voice for change. Next. So if a company is using too much packaging, complain to them, and it does have an impact. Kogan now use paper for packaging. Next. Straws, 500 million used every day around the world. Next. And at Lord Howe Island, our school children took paper straws to cafes and they no longer use plastic ones, which is good. Next. Bamboo's a great material, cheap to produce and breaks down when composted. Next. Water bottles, major issue around the world for pollution. Next. And it's great to see that program put up by your organisation as a target to reduce plastic drinking water bottles in the shipping industry down to zero. So this is taken off the website, something like 1 billion bottles every year. So having that reduced to zero is going to have a great impact. Next. And bottle caps are one of the major common items that we find washed up onto our beaches. We had a fairly windy episode in February here at Lord Howe Island, and just in 5 minutes I walked on the beach and they were the bottle caps I collected. So having no plastic water bottles on shipping is going to help minimise that. Next. And plastic bottle caps are one of the major items we also retrieve from the stomachs of our dead birds. Next. So this is another thing taken off the website of your organisation, and a sustainable future is a must for every industry, every city, every community has to have a sustainable future. It doesn't have to be something actioned by rule of law. It can happen by an individual organisation taking initiative. And it's great to see Mikhail and his energy and enthusiasm to get this sort of program going up with your organisation. Next. And for the future of our seabirds, I urge everybody to work with Mikhail and try and carry out this great initiative. Now, I have gone through a little bit quick towards the end there because the battery on my MacBook is going down. It's got 5% left, so I'll finish up there, but I'll let Mikhail say something, and I could answer a question or two if anybody had them. Hello, are you there, Mikhail?
I am here. I hope all still can hear me. Yeah, I'm still struggling IT-wise. Everything here is coming after as I'm talking, so I'm gonna try to go slow here. Ian, first of all, my deepest thanks for you doing this presentation. I'm devastated every time I see this, when I see the reaction on the stage, on our blog chat, that people are getting engaged on our side, and we have another session in an hour with all the ship owners and other managers that are really the one taking action on this. We already got 5% of the industry taking action over the past 3 months. We're expecting a lot more to join. But you said something in the beginning about the 8 million tons of plastic. And this is growing year on year on year, and we're using more and more plastic, probably more single use. When you're in the water in Lord Howe Island, you see plastic floating around?
Not too much in the ocean, fortunately, but it gets washed up on the beaches. Every day people, residents and tourists, walk on the beaches, and they do pick up plastic and put it in bins. We have special bins designed for this, and it is something that's coming ashore every day. Fortunately, we're not as bad as the Mediterranean Sea, where I believe people swimming see plastic and it gets on them, their arms and legs as they're swimming around. We're not that bad, but our seabirds forage right across the Tasman Sea, and they're bringing it in from wide and far.
Yeah, I can only say I see the same problem in Norway. I sail in the summer and we find remote islands, as we call it, and there too, you just have to lift up the rocks and you will find plastic debris underneath. So this is a growing problem. I don't know if you can hear me still.
Yeah, it is a growing problem, and the plastic that was put in there in 1990 is still floating around the ocean. The plastic that went in the year 2001 still floating around, so it's accumulating year after year. So it has to stop. Plastic has to stop getting into the ocean now, and then actions to remove it. There are organisations building equipment to remove the plastic, but it is very urgent to stop plastic going to the ocean today, really, to minimise the impact on wildlife.
You mentioned the balloons, that when you find the balloons from organisers and you contact them, what is their reaction when they realise their balloon has been lost as waste in a beach?
Yeah, they're quite apologetic. They have no idea that the balloons end up in the beach, on the ocean, and float all the way to Lord Howe Island. So they're quite apologetic, and some of them a little bit ashamed, and they pledge to take actions to minimise that. So people are responsive. You approach them in the right manner, and people are responsive to change.
Any ideas for us as an organisation, shipping industry, us as suppliers, ship owners, ship managers? I mean, we've taken action through this IMPA stage, but are there more that you can think of that we need to do? Seems to me what we're doing is not enough.
I think the talk about how plastic is harmful for wildlife and for humans because it's getting into the food chain through fish. I think just talking about it to people, maybe posters on ships could be something. I'm happy to share any images I've got with the birds cut open. Yeah, awareness. If people are not aware, they won't take action, but as soon as people are aware, then there is the option that they will take action to change their habits and minimise plastic going into the ocean. And of course, I guess on shipping, there's options of having the provision of water, fresh drinking water, available at stations where people can fill their own water bottle up or a glass and drink out of that rather than use a disposable plastic water bottle.
Correct. Ian, I want to thank you for joining us today and share your knowledge, also views on this, and I do believe that this will have an impact more than already done.
Well, thank you, Mikhail, and thank you for your great initiative, and keep the good work up. And I'll follow closely what's happening with your organisation, and if I can assist with any program with any company, just contact me. Thank you very much.
And for everyone listening in, we will have this uploaded on the IMPA State page. And here we also have the BBC document regarding plastic. So I recommend people to see it, and also go on Facebook and share it with the global population so everybody realizes the problem. So thank you, Ian, and thank you for everyone listening in.
Thank you. Good luck with the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.